Well, there's nothing like playing the Cleveland Browns to get back to winning ways. The Cincinnati Bengals defeated the Browns in Week 7 to get off their little losing streak that they had here, and we'll talk more about that game in just a few minutes here. I'm Anthony Cosenza. I'm joined by my co-host Connor Howe. Connor, how are you?
I'm good, man. Excited for the resurrection of the season, hopefully, after that game.
That's right. That's right. And we're also joined by a special guest. We haven't had a guest for a few weeks. Ken Marangolo with Hogs Haven is joining us. Ken, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm not rooting necessarily against you guys personally. I wish you nothing but the best, obviously.
Appreciate it.
Starting next week.
Yeah. And for those of you, this is one of the weeks that for those of you that download the show on iTunes and all of that, I hope that you subscribe to our YouTube channel and check out the video, because Ken himself has a pretty nice little man cave behind him, and he's got a fantastic shirt on. Do you want to describe what that is? Because it's your own creation there, Ken.
It's Scott McLuhan became our general manager 2 years ago, or this is his second full season. We have been starved for an actual legitimate professional head of a franchise, or for lack of a better word. He's kind of our savior. McLuhan came in, may have been a couple rough pronunciations of his name, but right away I said, that's McLovin. He's our McLovin. And so I took the license from Superbad, put his face on it, and now I got a t-shirt. And it's my favorite t-shirt now.
I love it. That's pure genius right there. Ken is with us to preview the Bengals Week 8 matchup against the Redskins, which is taking place in London. And for guys like Connor and myself, I'm not really revved up about it because, Ken, I got to be up at about like 6 a.m. to start getting ready and watching the coverage of this game. But that being said, these are it seems like two pretty evenly matched teams. The Redskins made the playoffs and won the division last year and got off to a bit of a slow start this year, but they're playing a little better. But news and notes, there's a couple of interesting injuries. Josh Norman and Jordan Reed appeared to, I think I read they came back to practice on Wednesday.
They both practiced today. I don't know if it's clear that they've necessarily been cleared to play in the game on Sunday, but they both practiced today. I believe Trent Williams was out there as well.
Okay, yeah. So those are three of the Redskins' better players, obviously. Let's start with Norman. First of all, how has he looked overall this offseason? Because he was one of the biggest gets this offseason by any team. And how do you feel, and Redskins fans feel, about the matchup with A.J. Green, who is having himself a monster season?
A.J. Green's awesome. Players like him, they're going to get theirs. And so you're not necessarily saying, Josh Norman shut down A.J. Green. You hope he can. But A.J. Green is going to be A.J. Green. So you can't get overly worked up about a play here and there. To be honest with you, it's amazing how good Josh Norman is. When we don't have a ton of talent on defense at key spots. And when you look at the way we've won some of our games, or even been competitive in some of our games, and you wonder how we did it, and you go back and watch the tape, and you're like, oh, yeah, Josh Norman. I mean, he's not necessarily shutting the same guy down every play, but he's locking it down. He's forcing the ball to other places. He makes such an impact on all levels of the field, up front and of course, deep. He's a leader. Guys on the squad respond to him, and you hear people say, "Oh, he's a baller," stuff like that. The guy, he's tough as nails. I watched him come off the field a couple of times with injuries. I didn't think that he was going to get back on the field, and I watched him while the game was going on, literally talk his way back in. Now, in today's day and age, with the concussions, you're not going to see that. However, on my show last night, The Audible, we talked about him playing this week. I don't think many players would come back and play after the knock he took last week in today's NFL. But what I said last night was, I'm not saying the doctors should clear him. I'm not saying that it's the right thing to do for him to play, but I know in my heart that he's the kind of guy who'll figure out a way to pass whatever test he's got to pass. He's got to pass it by tomorrow in order to make that flight over. And I just always kind of thought he's going to play, because he's one of those guys you just always think he's going to figure out a way to be on the field. So I expect him to play. If he doesn't play, it's kind of a good thing, because he'll get 2 weeks off with our bye week. But I just see him as a guy who just figures out a way to get on the field, and another reason why the guys in the locker room respond to him.
So Jay Gruden, we all know, spent a significant portion of time in Cincinnati.
Yeah.
And, I think that Bengal fans, I don't know, people had mixed opinions. I think personally, I wasn't very impressed with his play calling. I thought it was crazy that he made, Andy Dalton throw 50 something passes in one of his, I think it was his second year in the league in a playoff game. And so, he was a great offensive coordinator for what he was, but I don't exactly think that I didn't expect. I should say this. I didn't expect him to be able to go into Washington and win a division within 2 years. That was really impressive of him. It was impressive of him to do that despite the whole RG3 controversy. How do you guys think that Jay Gruden has performed in his first couple of seasons, and are you guys satisfied with what he's doing? And do you think there's anything he could improve on, or anything that anything that would indict him or anything like that?
In short, I do think he's our guy. I don't think there's any reason right now that would lead me to believe we should move away from him. I always talk about the marriage between the head coach and the GM, and between McLovin and Jay Gruden. I think you have a pair of guys who are on the same page. Keep in mind, McLovin didn't pick Jay Gruden; he inherited him, and most GMs at some point always want their guys. But I think Jay Gruden has a chance to become McLovin's guy. Our offense is the strength of our team. We statistically speaking, we're moving the ball. We're running the ball well. Our offensive line has improved. A guy named Bill Callahan, who a lot of NFL fans know, he's been in the league a long time. He's a great coach. As you know, Jay Gruden favors size, which also syncs up with McLovin's philosophy on players. Big, strong, athletic guys. Measurables, long arms, reach, burst, speed. I mean, these little metric things that, you might say they're kind of Moneyball-esque, but not really. Everyone wants big, strong guys. But on the line of scrimmage, we've seen a lot more size come on thanks to Jay Gruden. That's what he likes. At the end of the day, his scheme is working. Sean McVay is actually calling our plays. I love what we do on offense. I'm a Kirk Cousins guy. Do I think he's a Hall of Famer right now? Of course not. But he's more than capable of running this offense. In Jay Gruden's offense, you don't ask your quarterback to be the hero. You teach him how to do it. There's not hot reads. In his offense, everything's kind of built in. So if Kirk Cousins just understands what the defense is doing in front of him, he's going to make a lot of completions. And when we're operating at our best, there's that balance, and he's not throwing for 50 times a game. I do see him throwing the ball a lot this week, though, and we'll see how that plays out, for our benefit or our detriment. But to answer your question, I like Jay Gruden. I think he's done enough to earn, a chance to stick around for a little while, and I think that his offense has already been on the improvement scale, and I think there's a ton of room to improve it. For example, throw the ball more to Deshaun Jackson. Why not? I mean, that's something you could do a whole lot more. And have it impact your team in a variety of ways. We haven't really done that a whole lot yet successfully. So there's areas to build on this offense. And I think, give McLovin another draft, another free agency period to bring in some guys. I think you're going to see Jay Gruden probably. I think he's going to be our coach for a while.
Yeah, so you kind of hinted at it, but Deshaun Jackson's one guy I think particularly could have a big day against the Bengals. We saw in the Bengals win against the Dolphins that Kenny Stills, that kind of embattled speed threat that they have, he's a very good deep threat, but he doesn't have consistent hands. Deshaun Jackson, obviously a better player overall. And the Bengals have really struggled, I think, against quality deep threats. Sammy Coates burned them for the Steelers. And they'll face a long string of deep threats in the upcoming weeks, which is kind of, Deshaun Jackson isn't the number one guy you want to go up. He's not the number one guy you want to go up against to start off a string of, games against deep threats. But that being said, how has he looked this year? Like you said, he hasn't done, he hasn't been putting up the numbers you'd like to see out of a guy who's signed for what I would assume is a pretty sizable contract. Do you think that he could have a big impact on Sunday?
I hope so. First of all, obviously, I hope so. I think for whatever reason, that the deep ball to Deshaun Jackson just hasn't been there. You can chalk it up at times to Kirk Cousins just not having enough time to let the deep route develop. I think we have some really gifted weapons on offense. Jordan Reed, Jamison Crowder, Chris Thompson, even before you get to Pierre Garçon and Vernon Davis for that matter. Kirk Cousins is really comfortable in that underneath and intermediate area, and it's easy to throw the ball to Jordan Reed because he catches everything and he's a stud. So you got to probably tell Kirk to take that shot at least once or twice in the first half. Whether they make it or not, that's what makes the defense honest, and that's ultimately what opens it up for the underneath stuff anyways. When I look at Deshaun Jackson, here's what I'm worried about. I'm worried about him checking out mentally if you don't use him enough. He is that kind of player, and now he's a great player, and he's an elite talent, and not many guys can do what he does. You know, the only big difference between him and A.J. Green at the end of the day is size, because at the end they're both really number ones, but you can't do things with Deshaun that you would do with A.J. I would argue that the players like Deshaun – now, just let me back up for a second. Deshaun Jackson is a Philadelphia Eagle to me, always and forever. So I have a real hard time with him wearing the burgundy and gold. I'd love to see him go off. I cheer my butt off for him if he does well. But I still think about him in the green. And I wrote an article today, and it'll be out tonight and tomorrow morning. This is his last year of his contract. Deshaun Jackson will be a free agent. Still in that 30-year-old range. He's going to get another contract from somebody. I don't think it's going to be us, unless I'm just dead wrong, and that's the way our money's going to be spent. I might dangle him before the trade deadline, not because I don't think we can use him, because we can. It's because we're not using him. So if you're not going to throw him the ball, you think someone's not going to give us a draft pick for Deshaun Jackson? I think they would. You don't see those deals made too very often. So, and it's a crazy thing, and I get crushed every year. I've read the trade Deshaun Jackson article every single season since he's been here. So it's more of a tradition than anything else. They're not going to trade him. Connor, to answer your question, I think he could have a huge day because that's the kind of player he is. It just comes down to whether or not the Kirk Cousins and Jay Gruden get in their head that they're going to throw that ball. Whether it's there or not, just throw it out and air it out. He can protect the quarterback deep. But more often than not, he has this uncanny ability to make a play on a ball at full speed that just not many guys can. I mean, it's really, really hard to guard. I don't know, which one of your quarterbacks, could match up with that. Just the same as I don't know what one of our cornerbacks can match up with A.J. Green, for example, if Josh Norman can't play.
This is the Orange and Black Insider. We're talking with Ken Marangolo of Hogs Haven within the SB Nation network of sites. And we are previewing the Redskins game with the Bengals in London this Sunday. Ken, you mentioned Kirk Cousins a couple of times, and I kind of got a two-pronged question for you about it. Sure. So a lot of people see a very big resemblance between the play of Andy Dalton and the play of Kirk Cousins. There are a lot of comparisons there, a little bit of surprising ability to scramble a little bit, some scrappiness, but also, maybe even a little bit of a stigma of not being able to win the big game, at least as of yet in their respective careers. Number one, do Redskins fans view that as a slight or a compliment to Kirk Cousins in that comparison? And number two, we've seen him struggle early this season, and then he's kind of come around. And as he's come around, the team has obviously started winning some more games. So what kind of sparked the change there?
Well, your first question first. You could do a whole lot worse than being compared to Andy Dalton. I think Andy Dalton's a fine quarterback, certainly a player worthy of investing in if you're an NFL team. I always say, every NFL team has to, at some point in time, choose who they're going to invest in at the quarterback position. You don't always get a chance to invest in Peyton Manning or Andrew Luck or Tom Brady. Sometimes you have to develop a guy and believe in him and pay him. I think that's Kirk Cousins for us. If he compares favorably to Andy Dalton in any way, I'll take it. I like Andy Dalton. I want to say he's got some great nickname that involves Ginger, something Ginger. I forget what it was, but I always, because he's been on my fantasy team a number of times.
The Red Rifle is one, yeah.
The Red Rifle, yep, the Red Rifle. So I like Andy Dalton. I think he's capable of leading, a high-powered offense. Hey, listen, Andy Dalton didn't, illegally contact Antonio Brown last year on the field. Andy Dalton, wasn't arguing with the refs and causing personal foul penalties to put the Cincinnati Bengals out of contention in that playoff game last year.
He didn't fumble in the last minute either.
Yeah, well, exactly. I think that similar to the Redskins, the Bengals are pretty set on offense. I love their weapons. I love Tyler Eifert. I love Gio Bernard. I was happy to see Jeremy Hill, go off a little bit last week. It's a fun offense to watch. And at the end of the day, I love Marvin Lewis. So kind of, going back to the second part of your question, which, I think that, as far as Kirk Cousins is concerned, Anthony, and kind of redirect me here on my answer, but I feel like Kirk Cousins and both Kirk Cousins and Andy Dalton are capable of being above average, not just top half, top third quality quarterbacks in this league. Both teams should be very happy to have them. And, at the end of the day, neither one of those guys is probably going to be the reason why their team, failed, I believe.
All right, I've got one more question for you. And kind of like we were all just talking about for a second, the Bengals, obviously, their playoff woes, and their biggest woe in the playoffs and in the regular season, which I kind of want to get to, is the fact that they haven't been able to stop the run. And, Arian Foster ran for, I think 200 yards or 300 yards in 2 games, something like that in the playoffs, and just ran up the scoreboard. And even, we saw last week Kevin Hogan, a backup quarterback for the Browns, the third string at the beginning of the year, just ran for 100 yards against them, I think, on 7 carries. And so the Bengals obviously haven't been able to stop the run. The Redskins have been running the ball well with Matt Jones and I think Chris Thompson. But I've heard that, Matt Jones had a little bit of an issue with fumbling. And I'm just curious, what's your opinion on the Redskins ground game? Do you think it's an effective running attack, and do you think they're going to have success on Sunday?
Yeah, and wait, Anthony, did I answer your question on the last? You had a second half of that question. I felt like I didn't hit it.
No, you got it, man. You got it. Okay. You're good.
Okay. As far as the running game is concerned for the Redskins, so first of all, I compare Chris Thompson to Gio Bernard. Although he gives up an inch or so in height and he's giving up pounds, Gio is way more established and came into the league with a lot more, glitz, out at UNC. So it sounds like I'm a freaking Bengals fan, by the way, as I'm talking to you guys.
Hey, that's why we brought you on, buddy.
Join the bandwagon while it's open.
Our offense runs through Chris Thompson right now, and that's the truth. If you go back and look at his touches, you look at when he's getting the touches, you look at the plays they're calling for him. He was on the field for that entire last drive when we took the lead against Detroit last week. He's getting anywhere from 10 to 12 to 15 carries, anywhere from 4, 5, 6 or more catches. And he's elusive, he's fast. He will remind you of Gio. He's a little bit smaller than Gio, probably a little bit more fragile. We talk about Matt Jones. You asked about his fumble problems. The interesting thing, because we do a lot of draft stuff, as I'm sure you guys do in the offseason. You get into the nitty-gritty of drafting and scouting, and you know that they give a crap about all different kinds of measurements. The interesting thing about Matt Jones, and the reason why he dropped in the 3rd round, because he had much higher ratings on almost all parts of his game, but his hands were measured just a little bit small. It sounds crazy. Doesn't mean he's not going to be a good back, but from a scouting perspective, a hand measurement correlates into some probability of risk, and that hand measurement correlates to fumble risk. Now, we knew this when we drafted him, and if he didn't have these fumble problems, you would say the hand thing means nothing, and the hand thing might actually mean nothing. It could actually be because of something else. But because he does have the fumble problems, it makes me think about why he fell to us at the bottom of the third round of the draft. He's been dropping the ball, and the problem is that when he drops the ball, it's in the worst possible time, like on the goal line. When you just drop the ball in the end zone and just give up 7 points. That's gonna leave a really it's gonna leave a mark when you talk about Jay Gruden's confidence in a guy. There's a lot of coaches in this league that will never go back to him. I think we have to go back to him. But what you will see this week, you'll probably see my boy R. Kelly, Robert Kelly. I love calling him R. Kelly. We got all the R. Kelly jokes, by the way, all week long. I think that R. Kelly, I think he's going to start. I think they're going to start him. I think they're going to give him carries. He's a rookie. He's raw. He's from Tulane. I don't think he's as good as Matt Jones. He's certainly not as naturally athletically talented as Matt Jones is. But he hasn't fumbled, to my knowledge, and he plays hard, like you would expect kind of a lesser heralded running back guy to play. They just always seem to play just a little bit harder. So I do expect to see him early and often for the Redskins. The Bengals run defense isn't the worst, and probably not worse than ours. So I would expect the Redskins to want to run. And, whenever I think about these England games, they tend to be pretty terrible games. People who wake up early on Sunday morning to watch NFL football have not been rewarded mightily in some of these games. And I've been saying all week, a terrible England game favors the Redskins. Why? Because I don't know. Because it seems like when we get ourselves into nasty, ugly games where you just feel terrible, your stomach's all knotted up, and you're like, oh, what the hell is going on? I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's going to happen next because stupid stuff just keeps happening. I think that favors us because I think Cincinnati's a little bit more of an established team. I think Cincinnati counts on certain things going their way because it has gone their way. And so if little random things don't go Cincinnati's way, I think the Redskins are used to that. I think the Redskins might be like, okay, it kind of evens the playing field. And it sucks out loud for Bengals fans, season ticket holders, and home team fans that have to give up a home game so that the Bengals have to go on the road to England. That sucks. I would be so pissed. So pissed. And it might be the equalizer this week.
Yeah. Yeah. So before we get your prediction, Ken, I meant to do this early on.
Yep.
Give us a little bit of background, your history with Hogs Haven and the podcast that you mentioned already in the interview. Kind of what's some of the stuff you're doing over there so we can direct some of our fans, at least over there for the week, to check out some of your content.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm throwing all this love at Tyler Eifert and Jeremy Hill. Bring it on back.
You're wrapping it with a ribbon, man.
All right. So I've been on Hogs Haven since 2009. Buddy of mine, Kevin, and I picked it up in 2009. He's gone for a couple years now. So I'm the managing editor. I got about 10, 12, 13 writers. And, we hit all the kind of the same singles and doubles that you guys hit, on a daily basis. The interesting thing about Washington, D.C., for a town for a major media market with a team in all the major sports, the Redskins are it. It's a unique beast in that it's a major media market that's dominated really by one team. Nothing could happen. What am I trying to say? Like a Redskins preseason game will crush Capitals playoff game or a Wizards playoff game or even a Nationals. I mean, it's weird. And so, being, on a Redskins site and kind of, developing kind of, a voice of the Redskins fan base has been awesome because it's given us some really cool access, obviously, to the players. We do a bunch of stuff with the Comcast Sportsnet station here in town. I do post-game stuff, over in the studios, which is just super cool, because they have the former players that you get to, rub shoulders with.
Right.
My podcast is The Audible. We cover all DC sports, we target the people who like, Skins, Wiz, Nats, Caps. You're a DC homer, you come on over and check us out. But at the end of the day, Redskins stirs the Kool-Aid in Washington. That's why I got, Benjamin here. I got my Hogs signed helmet. And if you notice behind me now, that says 21 with Cooley.
That's Sean Taylor, right? Is that
Sean Taylor?
Yeah.
Sean Taylor went to that Pro Bowl posthumously. He had been killed. And Chris Cooley and Chris Samuels and Ethan Albright, the three Redskins who were in that game, all wore 21.
That's cool.
So that Chris
That's
actually,
so cool.
I got that from Chris, and it's
that's awesome.
So it's super cool. I know to see your memorabilia back there is awesome. And so it's a lot of fun. It's a grind, as you guys know. It's a second job, but it doesn't necessarily pay, like a job of any kind for that matter. And but you love doing it, and I love doing it, and it's rewarding. And I mean, you guys as Bengals fans, you've had your down years. You've been in the big game, and you've won. You've done a lot of winning, and Marvin Lewis has I love him as a coach, and he's helped you guys do a lot of winning. Redskins have had some pretty down decades. 91 was a Super Bowl, last Super Bowl we were in. I always talk about you guys, know the Twitter generation and this whole social media generation and the awfulness that gets spewed, in this, arena. Well, all the Redskins fans that are part of that, they don't know anything about winning as far as Redskins are concerned. They grew up without it. and it's so toxic and terrible at times. It can really you really kind of just have to put a blanket over your head and just
you lose faith in humanity a little bit up on Twitter. I mean, you know, some of these people just, oh man,
it's tough, man. It's real tough. So I appreciate, you know, anyone who's interested in checking us out at Hogs Haven. But you know, at the end of the day, I got no animosity towards Cincinnati. Everyone has those teams that they just don't like. And for me, Cincinnati's not one of them. So I thoroughly enjoyed talking to you guys about this.
Well, and I appreciate you just spending time and coming on. I know you've got both work and family responsibilities, and you were kind enough to donate your time, and I appreciate it. Obviously, a very entertaining interview. A prediction, if you will, if you have one, before you get out of here, Ken.
All right. Okay. So now, you know, Hogs Haven, we got guys on the ground out in England. You know, I got a writer in Tottenham, and you know, he does our Madden simulations, so he takes care of all that for me. He's our Hogwarts correspondent, but that's not. And I got another guy he's our Royal Baby News correspondent. So if Kate Middleton ever is pregnant, we got a guy right there, and we go live. I mean, we break everything to go live. So let's just say I have a little bit of some on the ground knowledge of England. I think it's going to be a close game. I'm thinking like a 24-21, 27-24 kind of game. Yeah. Obviously, I'm going to pick my guys just because that's what I'm going to do. I don't think this game's good. I don't think anyone's going to blow anyone out. I expect the players on both sides of the field that you would expect to make plays, the Eferts and the Greens on your side. I would like to say Deshaun Jackson and Jordan Reed on my side. We'll see if Kirk Cousins becomes that guy. And at the end of the day, we're going to have to make plays on defense in a way that we didn't a couple times against Detroit. So let's say 27-24 Redskins, and everyone's happy, and we're still friends at the end.
Yeah, there you go. I'm in close agreement in terms of it being a close game, but appreciate the time, Ken, and all of the great insight. I know it's asking of your time, and I greatly appreciate it. Ken Marangolo, the site manager over at Hogs Haven, the SB Nation Redskins site, helping us preview the upcoming Redskins game in London. Ken, enjoy yourself. You'll at least get to sleep in, I think, a little bit later, hopefully, than we will here on the West Coast, but appreciate the time.
Anthony, a proper tailgate begins at 6 a.m. all our time.
That's true.
There's only one way to do it.
Especially when you said your podcast was turning into a little bit of a whiskey jam, right? So,
it's whiskey every. So I got to tell you guys this, because you're going to watch our defense and you're going to say to yourself, how in the hell have these guys won 4 games? Because it's like, I don't know how they're doing it. None of us know how they're doing it. I compare our defense. It's like if all of a sudden porn pay-per-view starts coming in for free on your TV. Like, what do? Nothing. You don't turn the TV off. You don't call and report it. It's just like you just ride it out. You know, that's the way our defense. I'm not asking any questions. I don't care how it's happening. I'm just going to keep on watching. So if this game gets ugly, just remember I said ugly favors us.
Okay. All right, and we'll keep the pay-per-view analogy in mind too. That was a good one. Hey, keep rocking the McLevin shirt. Enjoy yourself this weekend. Thanks for the time, Ken.
All right, guys. Best of luck to you guys.
Appreciate it. Same to you. So that was Ken Marangolo of Hogs Haven, the SB Nation Redskins site, helping us preview the upcoming Week 8 matchup in London, England. Our big thanks to him. He brought not only some good knowledge, but quite a bit of humor.
It.
Yeah, he was
my favorite one we've done.
Yeah, he was a good guest. We are also joined now by Scott Schultze. He looks like he's been doing a little bit of housework or something of the like. Scott, how are you doing?
Doing pretty good now. Just kind of got in a few minutes ago. So, yeah, doing some house stuff and being watched by a certain little someone.
Okay. All right. Well,
he was supervising.
Yeah, he was a celebrity a few weeks ago on the show. So, if he wants to
might be making a repeat appearance.
Okay. All right. No problem. Let's start with now that we've previewed the Redskins game with Ken. Scott, let's kind of recap the Browns game. What are your overall impressions of that game, as well as your best and worst from that game?
I mean, it's very hard. It's very hard to say that the offense wasn't impressive. I mean, as much as actually, I'll just say offense for both. I mean, I'll start with the disappointment because it's just popped in my head. But Cedric Ogbuehi, and there was an excellent post on the Cincy Jungle site that was posted. It had a lot of little video clips. If you've not seen it, I definitely recommend watching it. But it showed Ogbuehi going up in.
That one was awesome.
Yeah,
John,
I mean, all those little
John.
clips and the little description. I mean, that was a great little article. So if anyone watching this has not seen it, definitely go to the website cincyjungle.com. Definitely read it. But it kind of highlights everything we saw in the game. That he just struggles in pass defense. He looks more like maybe a left guard than a right tackle. And I know I don't think he was drafted to be a right tackle. I kind of got the impression when they drafted him, he was supposed to be Whitworth's replacement. But even when he was drafted, I remember one of the comments came up the year he was drafted that he gave up the most pressures or sacks of all the Division I prospects who was going to be drafted that year or in the first few rounds. And the big thing on him was he didn't have the core strength, but he had the athleticism that Paul Alexander and the Bengals really liked. And yeah, on some of those plays, he doesn't seem to have that core strength yet. And maybe it's the injury. I mean, it could be several things. I mean, there's obviously hope if he's that athletic, but you don't want to see him become another Jason Smith kind of guy the Rams had. So that's still the biggest disappointment because it's not like he was going up against, Pro Bowl guys. He was going up against the guy the Browns just drafted from Penn State, Nassib, and then the guy from Oklahoma State, Ogba. I'm going to butcher his name. Yep. So that's a disappointment. The thing I really liked was, and I'm going to go with the obvious because I know Connor likes to go a little deeper. So I'll save the more exciting ones or the more deeper ones for him, and I'll just say AJ Green. I mean, the ridiculous Hail Mary and it wasn't just that catch too.
For anyone.
I mean, yeah, there were other catches where he is who he is. And I think we're going to be talking about him more later. So I'm just going to preface that by saying that, yeah, thoroughly impressed. Granted, it was the Browns, so I don't want to get too excited. Right. I mean, when you're going up against an 0-7 team, it's on their fifth-string quarterback. You sure hope you win, especially at home. But it was nice seeing the offense actually do some offensive things. The good kind of offensive.
The good kind of offensive, exactly. Just real quick, Scott, quick follow-up question for you. Obviously, I think he made 8 catches for about 168, 169 yards. Green did. There were 2 that were obviously amazing, the Hail Mary and the one-handed catch. Of those 2, did you have a favorite of the 2?
I'm going to have to say the one-handed catch. The Hail Mary was the highlight one. And obviously there's a lot of skill. But when you get in that kind of situation, there's definitely an element of luck that the ball has to go just the right spot, be tipped just the right place. And you have to make a hell of a play after that. But there's a lot of kind of luck factors go into it. But when you're making a one-handed catch and doing some of the things we've seen him do over the years, catching balls over people, just the way he adjusts in air, makes people look silly in coverage, where it's just all skill. And you're like, wow, I am so glad he's on our team.
Yep, I'm in agreement with you. I mean, I love the Hail Mary catch, but that one-handed one down the sideline was it was unbelievable. It didn't even move. I mean, it just stuck to his hand. It was unbelievable. Connor, your biggest disappointments and most impressive, as well as overall impressions of the team in their win to get to 3-4 against the Browns.
Yeah, just to go counter argument here, because I legitimately believe this. I think I love the Hail Mary catch. I honestly think legitimately it was the best catch of the year. If it wasn't a Hail Mary per se, if it was just like a deep pass and that exact same play happened, I mean, NFL would be picking it up like the Odell Beckham catch. It was the Odell Beckham catch, but better. He was getting interfered with because it's illegal once the ball tips someone, yet he still comes down with the ball, juggles it, makes the catch, and it's just so funny with all of those years where commentators are saying, AJ Green used to be a juggler. Oh, did you know AJ Green was a juggler? Everyone by now knows, AJ Green was a juggler, but he juggled that so well. I don't think any other receiver in the NFL could have done that, and he came down with it. And obviously, it still took a great throw from Dalton. But at this point in his career, man, those one-handers by AJ down the sideline, they just seem routine to me, man. I feel like he's done so many of those. I remember the Bronco game last year, him and Marvin Jones just putting on a clinic running those out routes and coming down with those crazy passes. But yeah, okay. Anyways, let's move on. So on to the whole positives and negatives, and like Scott kind of said, there's always gonna be a caveat when you're playing the Browns because it's the Browns. Whenever you play a team that the Bengals have yet to play a team that's like between really bad and really good, right? Like they've played like 4 teams that are probably like 99% chance all 4 of those teams are going to the playoffs, unless I would say the Broncos, take it like a drastic turn, or the Cowboys, something happens with Prescott where he's not the guy anymore, or they sub in Romo or whatever I mean, Dallas is a fragile team. I think still, they're like the 2015 Panthers in the sense that every single week I think this is the week they're going to lose, and every single week they keep winning. I don't know what it is about them, but that's just one of the feelings I get with the Cowboys this year. But anyways, like I said, I mean, it's just they haven't played a team in the middle yet. I think the Redskins would be that one team where we really kind of understand who this team is. We all expected them to beat the Browns. I know a lot of people might have thought, oh, it might be, coming off back-to-back losses. It might have been a trap game where they finally lose to the Browns, but that obviously wasn't the case. And in terms of positives and negatives, I think for positives, you have to go just the run game in general. And like Scott said, Ogbuehi still has left some to be desired, but the running game worked on Sunday for the first time in a very long time. I think it was the Bengals' first 100-yard rusher since week 2 of last season when Jeremy Hill ran for 100 against the Chargers and coincidentally fumbled twice and got benched. So, I mean, it was just and granted, he had a 74-yard carry, a 40-yard carry, and a 20-yard carry. But even with those carries excluded, he still averaged over 5 yards per carry on his remaining X amount of, I think, 6 carries, because I think he had 9 total. He just looked like a great running back. And like I think we've all been saying this entire year, it's not just that, I mean, Jeremy Hill, it's not a knock on him, but we all know he's just a guy who needs the line to block well in front of him. And if the line does, he's one of the best backs in the NFL. If the line doesn't block, he's not going to be able to create anything on his own. And that's just the kind of runner he is. And that's why a lot of people have loved Giovanni Bernard, because he seems to be a guy who can make some plays even when the line is struggling. But Jeremy Hill is, if the line blocks in front of him, he is an elite running back. I still maintain that to this day. I think I brought this stat up last podcast, but 61% of his yards before last week against the Browns had come, or the Bengals rushing yards in general had come after a contact, which is just terrible, because it's basically saying that every single, like, it's not just before the line, it's not after the line of scrimmage, it's after contact. So if they get hit behind the line, if they get hit anywhere, more than half of the yards are coming after they get hit, which is, it's just not, that just shows the line hasn't been blocking well. And so even, way he struggled, but there were a couple plays where he actually had a nice run blocker too, which, opened up a hole for Jeremy Hill. I think his long 74-yarder was right afterwards. The commentator or whatever was talking about how he made a nice block on the play. And so you got to take your positives with your negatives. That being said, obviously we still hope that the right tackle position, whether it's Ogbuehi or Eric Winston, gets solved. That would probably be my negative too. And the negatives, I guess, on defense as well. I mean, you saw Sean Williams, man. He finally comes down with a pick after dropping 2 or 3, and then what does he do? He fumbles. So he still has yet to come down with an interception and actually hold on to the ball through the time he hits the ground. So, I mean, he's played okay. He's been better than, I think a lot of people expected. He's definitely improved as the season's progressed. But the safety play in general has still just left so much to be desired. And like I was talking about with Ken, I mean, the Bengals have struggled against deep threats. They struggled against Coates. They struggled against Kenny Stills. They've got Deshaun Jackson this week. Marquise Goodwin on the Bills, who, I think was trying out for the triple jump for the U.S. and a guy who is one of the fastest players in the entire NFL. They've got Mike Wallace on the Ravens still yet to play twice. There's just the potential of a deep threat burning the Bengals scares me, because I think it's something that could legitimately happen to this defense. And just the uncertainty of the linebacker position still, with Vinny Reyes playing well. Carlos Dansby hasn't been the wonder that we all thought he would be in pass coverage, but that being said, he still recorded 4 tackles for loss, which I think is only second to Geno Atkins' 6, I believe. Don't quote me on that, but yeah, overall it was a great game. Like Scott said, you have to take the caveat of we're playing the Browns, but at the end of the day, the Bengals showed, I think, to summarize what we all know that they have, and that's talent. They have the talent. The talent level's there. They're a playoff caliber team in terms of personnel. They have a quality coaching staff, And it looks like things are turning around. Like I mentioned before, the Bengals are a streaky team. They always seem to go on these runs. At some point in the season, they've done it early in the year last year. They've done it in the middle of the year, I think in 2013 and or 2014. They did it late in the year. I think they went 7-1 to finish off the 2012 season. So there's plenty of time left in the year. They're 3-4. They're only a couple games or one game out of the wild card and the division lead. So I think the people who are saying the Bengals can only make the playoffs by winning the division are failing to consider that the AFC West and the NFC and the AFC East, all the teams in those divisions they always beat each other up. You know, the Chargers are a team that just beat the Broncos, and they're playing again on Sunday. So the Bengals are still totally in the mix, and the biggest takeaway has to be that regardless of what happened in Cleveland, you have to just negate that. And, you know, Jeremy Hill had a huge game, AJ Green had a huge game. We know they're both capable of that, but that's what we know, is that they're capable. And hopefully it shows up against a great team or just a good team for that matter. But, you know, the Bengals win games when AJ Green catches passes, and you know, that's a good takeaway.
Yeah, I mean, I can't disagree with either of you. I guess I'll try and get a little creative with my disappointments and impressions. I will say that the Bengals had a bit of an attitude, and in a good way on Sunday. And granted, they knew they were going up against a lesser opponent. But still, there is a little bit of danger there because they're going up against a head coach that is very, very familiar with all of the players on the Bengals and Hugh Jackson, and a team that is starved for their first win. There was a lot of things that seemed to be positioned for the Browns to sneak out some weird, wacky win, and the Bengals didn't allow it to happen. And one such play, I pointed this out on one of the clips. I think it was Braden Whitted of Cincy Jungle made the clip. On the Jeremy Hill long 74-yard run, you saw Andrew Whitworth, a guy who is usually composed, a guy who is a team leader, a team captain. He was kind of pointing at the Browns sideline and giving them the business a little bit. And not only is it that the Bengals needed to go up against maybe a lesser opponent, get a win and really get some confidence, but going in there and having that attitude of we're going to take it to you and we're going to get back to winning. You saw a lot of guys playing fired up. You know, Terrell Pryor was held in check for the most part. Granted, that has to do with the quarterback situation,
and he was injured. But I mean, Dre had a great game.
Right. So that there was just a lot of things to like, especially from the attitude. I hate to be greedy, though. A big disappointment for me is the win differential. And even though the Bengals won by 14 points. You look at one of the touchdowns was the Hail Mary when they were completely botching the clock right before the half. So I like that they got a win. I like that they got a win that they were supposed to get, but I wasn't totally, especially with the offensive dominance, I wasn't totally comfortable with the win differential. It seems like it was a game that could have been ran away with longer. Mike Nugent is a big reason for that. He finally had one of those terrible Mike Nugent games where he missed 2 field goals. That doesn't help anybody. So I hate to be greedy, but I got to say that the win differential for me was kind of the big disappointment, even though it was a closer game at some points than the end score indicated in my estimation. But those are our best and worst of the week as the Bengals beat the Browns 31-17 in Cincinnati. They are now, as Connor mentioned, back to 3-4 and right in the heat of the AFC North race because there's a lot of different stuff going on in that division, both with injuries and teams going on different streaks and all that stuff. So before we get to just a little bit more of our own preview of the Redskins games and some predictions, I don't know exactly what to title this segment, but it's a segment where we're going to talk about AJ Green. And I don't know about you guys, but this has to be, I mean, again, he's had 5 straight impressive seasons, but this has to be the start of one of the most impressive seasons in his career. He had one critical drop in the Denver game, which really hurt the team. But he's made incredible catches. He's dealing with new receivers that aren't always taking heat off of him at all times. Tyler Eifert's been out of the lineup, and he's still making a ton of plays, on pace for about 16 or 1,700 yards. Scott, I'm going to ask you guys both two questions. Is A.J. Green putting forth what you think to be his best season yet as a Bengal? And especially with Calvin Johnson out of the league and a couple of other things going on around the NFL, is A.J. Green, should he be considered the best receiver in the league right now?
I'm going to say, as far as his best season to date, I think statistically you'd have to say yes, because he's on pace, except for touchdowns, he's on pace for the most receptions and the most yards that he's had. And the amazing thing about that is he's not on pace for the most targets. I think that might have been his second or third year in the league, when they were just throwing to him like every other play. But you figure, not only is he putting up huge numbers, but he's not really having anyone help on defense, or help, pull the defense away. There's no Tyler Eifert, there's no Marvin Jones, no Mohamed Sanu, dealing with a very new, although a veteran and solid Brandon LaFell, and then a rookie Tyler Boyd, and tight ends who are middle late round draft picks who are pretty young. So he's pretty much doing it by himself. And the cool thing is, if you look at Andy Dalton isn't force feeding him like he was his first couple years. So I think that's another key. You look at, his first, it seemed like especially his rookie year, every play seemed like if it was a pass play, oh, AJ Green's triple covered, there we go. Oh, AJ Green's double covered and Jones is wide open, there we go. And he built those numbers doing that. This year, he's putting up those numbers, but it's just, great play. He's getting open. Dalton's getting better as far as recognizing coverage, not always forcing the ball to him, but he's making, So to answer your question, statistically and based on what I've seen, I think, this is probably his best year that I've seen as a Bengal, which is pretty impressive, because he's had like 5 Pro Bowl years in 5 years. So, it's hard for someone to top great, but if you could, I think he's doing it.
And do you believe he should be in the conversation as the NFL's best wide receiver at the moment?
He should be. I don't think he's going to be. And the only reason I say that is I just don't think the Bengals air it out enough. I think to do that, you really have to be on a team that scores, 40, 50, well, not 40, 50 points, but, it's one of these teams that has a quarterback that, you air it out. You have a Peyton Manning, you put up the gaudy numbers, which he's doing, but it helps to win. And I think the one exception to that was Megatron. That just because he got 2,000 yards that one year, awful close to it, and I mean he put up some pretty insane numbers on some very bad teams. So it's possible, but unless you're on a team that's just going to give you the sheer volume, and I think that's going to be the one thing that keeps him from being in that consideration. I'd like to see him up there. I just don't know if the national media is ready to say he's the number one guy, which I'm kind of okay with, because you look at it, there's a lot of really good receivers now. I mean, obviously Julio Jones, who he's always going to be compared to, is really good. There's some other guys, if he can stay on the field. Des Bryant tends to have moments and streaks where he's pretty solid. Demaryius Thomas is good when he has a quarterback. So Odell Beckham used to be good. That's a whole other issue.
He's so good. He's just a diva. I think that's what people don't like about him now.
And that is one nice thing about AJ Green. He's not Des Bryant or Odell Beckham ODB, in that he's just a fairly down to earth guy, as much as you could be for as good as he is. He's he doesn't say a lot of stupid things. He doesn't have a lot of antics or silly. He's just, hey, I'm a professional. I'm doing what I'm doing. I'd love to see him get the billing, and I think this could be the year, because Odell Beckham is having a down year. Des Bryant's been hurt. Demaryius Thomas is struggling because he can't get the numbers. Someone before the year, Allen Robinson, was thought to maybe take that step forward. They've been struggling. So I think this could be the year he gets his recognition, because he hasn't gotten an all-pro first team yet. And this could be. I think if he gets the recognition, he could finally get that all-pro, unless he just doesn't get the sheer volume that someone like Antonio Brown does, that keeps him from getting the recognition that I think he deserves. Because on a play-by-play basis, I mean, I think we've all seen that he is pretty well as good as you can get, even if he's not getting it thrown to him, 15 times a game.
Yep, he's the anti-Chad. If you think back to a few few years ago in terms of his demeanor. And Scott, you will be happy to know that on one of my fantasy teams, I have both Demaryius Thomas and Odell Beckham Jr. So I am loving life with my fantasy team. So, Connor, same questions to you, especially when you look at Antonio Brown in the division, who a lot of people just think and he is very good, obviously. But one thing that I always favored Green over Chad Johnson in terms of his Bengal career is Green has stepped up quite a bit more frequently. Not only in the postseason, I mean, he's had some bad spells there, but last year he had that big touchdown catch to help the Bengals get a lead on the Steelers. It's those Pittsburgh games that he seems to step up in way more often than Chad ever did. Now, that being said, Chad is obviously a different era now of a wide receiver, but in this era of Beckham Jr., Antonio Brown, some of these other guys, do you view Green as the top wide receiver currently in the NFL?
Yeah, I just wrote a post on it, and anyone check that out if you're interested. It's not that long, but I think it's a pretty fun article that I wrote. But anyways, on to the topic at hand. I think to be honest, there isn't anyone who's the definitive, hands down, comprehensive number one wide receiver in the NFL. Yeah. And that's what makes the NFL so interesting at this point, but it also makes it kind of boring. And maybe that's why viewership is down. It's AJ Green and Julio Jones, two of the less, like you call AJ the anti-Ocho. I would call him the anti-wide receiver. I'd call him the anti-wide receiver or a corner, because generally every single receiver, every single corner, these guys are people who just feast on, that swagger, that momentum and all this stuff. And Green definitely still plays with swagger and momentum, but he just isn't this demonstrative person. And that's why the NFL isn't really seemingly capitalizing on it. It's just because he and Julio, to be honest, are both guys who are kind of laid back, they're not going to make, the crazy, I mean, sometimes they'll make the one-handed catches, but their games are much more polished and intricate than, than just the catch the ball like Antonio Brown or Odell Beckham in space and then, juke one guy and you have open field in front of you. They're more of the take your guy one-on-one and beat him. Pittsburgh's offense is all about manufacturing space for Odell. You could say the same thing about the Dolphins with Jarvis Landry, same thing about the Giants with Odell, if I said Antonio with the Steelers. And let me just point out a few points that I had on the whole Green. And like I said, he's not a guy who I think is the definitive number one. But that being said, at his current trajectory, he's a guy that should be in the conversation right now. I think there's three guys in the NFL who deserve to be there. That's AJ, Antonio, and Julio Jones. And I think Odell is very close at number 4. Maybe Demaryius could be tossed in there. But, DeAndre Hopkins, Allen Robinson, like I think Scott mentioned, are nowhere to be found. I mean, DeAndre Hopkins is having a terrible season, and maybe that's on the quarterback. You could say the same thing about Alshon Jeffrey. I think Mike Evans is one of those guys who's climbing right now, and Dez is not on the field. So it's hard for me to put him there. He reminds me of Jordy Nelson in that sense, where when they're healthy, they're very talented players, but availability is your best ability at the end of the day. So anyways, on to these little things I had, and basically the article I wrote was, if you're making a case for AJ as the best receiver, here's what you're gonna say. And number one, he's a game changer. One statistic I just kind of did a little digging on. So over the past 2 seasons, the Falcons are 7-6 in games where Julio Jones tallies 100+ receiving yards. In that same time span, the Steelers are 8-4 when Antonio Brown does it. The Giants are 4-6 when Odell Beckham does it. Since week 1 of last year, the Bengals are 6-1 when Green has a 100-yard game, with the only loss coming in that game against the Steelers when Andy Dalton fractured his thumb on the first drive. So, I mean, and even look at this year. I mean, the Bengals are 2-0 or 3-0 in games when AJ Green has 100 yards. They're 3-0 in games where he catches a touchdown pass. Obviously, there's more than just Green going off to the Bengals winning games, but you can see that his impact on the field has a tangible result in the stat sheet, obviously, or on the scoreboard. And like I just said, it's not like Green is the single-handed guy or the guy who's single-handedly winning games, but he's not just putting up numbers in garbage time. He's never been that guy. The Bengals are generally in games. Last year, the most they lost by was 4 points. And So he's not getting these garbage time yards like I think a lot of people are going to say Odell Beckham does, and Julio was at some point. Another point I would say is the surrounding talent argument works in AJ Green's favor. A lot of people are going to say, oh, AJ Green's always had a good defense, blah 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 blah. But at the end of the day, if you're going just AJ, Antonio Brown, and Julio Jones. Julio Jones started off with Matt Ryan. Had Roddy White for a while, had Tony Gonzalez for a while. He didn't start off his career as the number one receiver in Atlanta. In the same way, Antonio Brown's had Ben Roethlisberger, who, like him or not, is probably a Hall of Fame quarterback. He had Mike Wallace early in his career, Heath Miller. The Steelers have never single-handedly relied on Antonio Brown. 2011 comes around. The Bengals don't have a running game. Their offensive line isn't great. They have a rookie quarterback. And AJ Green has a Pro Bowl season. The Bengals somehow miraculously pulled 9-7 out of their butts when in a year where a lot of people thought they'd go. I mean, not a lot of people, but some were saying they could go 0-16. They make the playoffs. 2016 comes around. Lose Marvin Jones. Lose Mohamed Sanu. Lose Hugh Jackson. Bengal fans are freaking out. The season's over. We're not going to win any games. I mean, obviously it was a little more optimistic than that, but people were certainly freaked out, and rightfully so, because we saw the Bengals lost 4 of their first 7 games. But even in that, you see that AJ Green, when he goes off, the Bengals win games. And so the surrounding talent argument, he came into the league with a rookie quarterback. He's always been the number one guy. Even Dez had, Miles Austin, that guy, man, his name always slips me. Laurent Robinson. He's had Jason Witten. All these number one guys have always had, that comfortable easing your way into the league. AJ never had that. He just went on his own. And then another argument, obviously the longevity argument. We all have heard the number by now, but AJ Green, 5 years, 5,000-yard seasons, 5 Pro Bowls. Only other receiver in NFL history to start off his career with 5 straight 1,000-yard seasons, Randy Moss. So pretty good company there. And then, I think my last 2 points, Green's 2016 season has been his best year yet. Like Scott said, he's on pace for career highs in receptions and yards. Right now he leads NFL in receptions with 50. He is second in receiving yards, 775. He's third in receptions of 20 or more yards with 13. Second in receptions of 40 or more with 5. Third in first down catches with 31. Julio right now having the better statistical year than AJ Green. You also have to take into consideration Green's faced some pretty good secondaries. He faced New England, who has Malcolm Butler, underrated corner, with McCourty, Jason McCourty, I think, and as free safety, who's very, very good at preventing those deep passes. One of the most talented free safeties in the league. You have obviously you have the Broncos with that talented secondary, yet he still managed to put up 70-plus yards on them. His worst game, funny enough, was against the Steelers with Ross Cockrell just kind of eliminating him from the game almost. And that was interesting because the Bengals, he just wasn't getting open, I guess. So that was one. But, he let's not forget week 1. Darrelle Revis hasn't, since week 1, we haven't seen any stories about, Darrelle Revis getting fried by all these guys, about how he's over the hill. Of course, that was the easy storyline to talk about in week 1. But the fact of the matter was AJ Green made a Hall of Fame caliber corner look like another guy. And that's just something you can't play off. And I think what I would love to see from the NFL is you hype AJ Green, Julio Jones, those 2011 draft class guys, the most loaded draft class in the past probably 20 years, maybe NFL history, with, AJ Green, Cam Newton, Andy Dalton, Von Miller, Julio Jones. I'm pretty sure JJ Watt was in that class. It was a loaded class. 2 receivers in the top 10 picks of the 2011 class emerging as number 1 potential, receivers in the NFL. Run that story. AJ and Julio, the quiet guys who are making plays and helping their teams win games. Look at it. I would love that. I love Julio. I have so much respect for him as a receiver. He's on that same caliber as Green, I think. And I think the last thing I mentioned was things are only going to get better for him in terms of, you look at the schedule, he faced most of the tough secondary / corner talent in the first half of the year. Obviously, you have the Bills in the second half, but 2 matches with the Ravens, you have the Browns. Even if Hayden's there, they don't have good safeties. You have the Steelers again. Hopefully, he capitalizes on that matchup. The Eagles have a good defense, but they really, I can't name a corner on their roster. He has a schedule that's set up in his favor. Obviously, the Redskins, Josh Norman, at best, is going to play banged up against him. The Texans, Kareem Jackson, I think, is out for the year. Kevin Johnson's out for the year, so you have Jonathan Joseph and no one else. Brandon LaFell is commanding attention. I think he has 3 straight games with a touchdown catch now. 4 catches in the past 3 games for TDs, and Eifert back. So, the targets might not go his way, like we all know. He's not going to get targeted a million times, but he's set up to have the best year of his career. He's currently, I believe, having the best year of his career, and he absolutely should be in the conversation. There's no excuse not for him to be there. He's a top 3 receiver, bar none. So that's where I'm at. I hope that he has a Calvin Johnson type year, really breaks out in the second half against lesser competition, minus 1 or 2 teams, and really shows the NFL, I'm AJ Green. Here's what I'm going to do.
Well, I said my piece early on. Go ahead, Scott.
There's this one thing I just wanted to say about AJ that I think a lot of us might be overlooking, because it has been 5 years, that when he came in the league, it was kind of standard that for the most part, in a outside of guys like maybe Randy Moss or Anquan Bolden, a rookie receiver really didn't do much their first year. The first year was kind of like, you're kind of getting into it. The second year you explode. And if you've ever done fantasy, the big thing was the third year receiver, because that's when they kind of came in their own. And, he had a rookie quarterback, rookie offensive coordinator. I think it was the very first scrimmage or the preseason play in practice that the Bengals had on their website when he was drafted, I remember, was him just doing a simple route, just toasted Leon Hall, who at the time was still very good, very healthy. And just from that moment, wow, this guy's something special, because you just don't see that happen. In the very first game he played, we're down, fourth quarter, we're playing Cleveland. Bruce Gradkowski has to come in, 41-yard touchdown catch, gives us the lead. We win the game. Ever since then, he's just been unstoppable. And there wasn't a ramp up. And even after missing some time in Georgia his senior year when he was suspended, it's just hard to overcome the fact that ever since he came in, he's just been dominant.
I agreed with both you guys. I've kind of said, I said it a little bit at the beginning of this segment here, that obviously he needs to be in that conversation with at least within that top 3 or 4. Not that truly matters, but you want to see a guy get their due, especially when you're the Bengals and the national media spotlight isn't always there.
You want those Hall of Fame implications. I mean, he's a guy who deserves that gold jacket if he keeps that trajectory going. So
right. So I think he's in there, and I think he is currently on pace to have one of his best seasons, if not his best season, which is definitely saying something. What are your thoughts, Bengals fans, as you listen to this show and you watch us as we record and all of that? You can sound off on your thoughts on AJ Green, both on the comment section on Cincy Jungle, where we post the entire show as well as little snippets of it. You can get in touch with us on Twitter at BengalsOBI. You can email us, theobinsider@gmail.com. You can download the show on iTunes. Thank you all for doing that. Much appreciated. You could also check out our content on YouTube and SoundCloud. And thank you for those who have subscribed and checked out our videos. It's been a lot of fun, and we appreciate the support. But let us know your thoughts on AJ Green. We're going to get out of here in just a few minutes. Before we do, we did talk extensively with Ken Marangolo of Hogs Haven, the SB Nation Redskins site, and he was a killer interview. But just to get some final thoughts from you guys going into this game, and as well as a score prediction, Scott, you have some. It sounds like you have some interesting stats in terms of the time the game is played and teams that play in London and so on and so forth.
Well, the one thing that I was wanting to mention was basically about the start time. I think it's kind of absurd because it's these London games, because it's a 9:30 Eastern Standard Time, and so for guys like you and Connor, it's a 6:30 start.
Yeah, don't remind me.
Which is kind of ridiculous, and I don't really think it has to be, because that's 3:30 London time. And some people have said, well, that's when they play soccer over there. It's kind of a late afternoon, but this isn't soccer. You're basically targeting the Americans who are over there, who, you could do it whenever. And it's just kind of frustrating because, but the reason they do it, it makes it so early for guys like me in the East Coast, and especially for people on the West Coast. And you look at it, well, the reason they do it,
12:30 a.m.
Yeah. I mean, you guys are going to be up awful early. And if you're tailgating at home or something, you're getting up at 5. Just don't go to bed Saturday. But that raises, think, well, why would they, start at this absurd time that makes everyone get up so early? And it ends by 1:00. And so it doesn't overlap the 1:00 games, and the league can have, instead of 3, because, they already have 3 games on Sunday, and heaven forbid they only have 3.5. Now they have 4 because, they get the most dollars. And so it kind of brings up the question, and there's going to be a post on this coming up, do we really need to have it that early? And our Bengals, how many Bengals fans are actually going to get to see this game? Because a lot of Bengals fans, believe it or not, do stuff on Sunday other than, football from 1 a.m. or 1 p.m. to midnight. Not all of them. Granted, some of them don't, but I think a lot of them do. And there was a very interesting survey that I found the other day that asked the question, because a lot of people do go to church. So it's, would you skip a religious service to watch your favorite football team? Now that's kind of relevant because, this is kind of during when people would go to church. And yeah, so you would be one of the, interestingly, the result was 80%, over 80% would not skip the religious service. So Connor is in the minority. And if you figure,
way to make me look bad.
80% of Bengals fans who go to church are going to be missing this game. And not only church, but anything that you have a regular commitment to. Some people spend it as family time because they're going to be watching, they're going to be losing the husband at 1:00 until, who knows when. So it's, it's usually time for family, or maybe they go golfing, or people go jogging because the biking trails aren't crowded, or, sleeping off Saturday night, or whatever it is. They're doing, usually have a commitment. And if you have a regular strong commitment, maybe you get with some guys and you go, maybe it's an older person and they go eat donuts and drink coffee at the local diner, whatever it is. And then they get home, it's 1:00, you watch the game. Well, there's, they're doing something. And so when they put this early game on, they're really forcing this dilemma and this conflict of, you have to choose, do you want, how dedicated are you? Are you going to give up this commitment you have? And, kind of that survey kind of showed with the football or with the church that I think you could apply to, pretty much anything you have a strong commitment to. And it kind of kills that whole idea that NFL likes to say, well, has these ads, football's family. Well, it's not really a family if they're telling you to screw your family and leave them aside because you have to get up at, 7 a.m. to watch a game. So I just think that's kind of absurd. I don't think it has to be that early, and it's purely a profit thing. So anyway, anyone watching this, if you want to let us know, there should be a post coming up, I think either today or tomorrow, or in the next few days about this. Feel free to let us know if you love the early time or if you hate it, if you really don't care. Yeah, I'd just be interested to hear what people think about that.
I know I don't like it.
Scott, I love how fired up you get about the timing of an NFL game.
Well, it's insanely early for any game.
Oh, yeah.
It's ridiculous. Yeah. Scott, but now focusing in on, you might be watching it a little groggy, but focusing in on the game itself, how do you what are you going to be looking for? How do you see this playing out? Do you worry about the Jay Gruden effect on Marvin Lewis's defense, and what's your score prediction in this game?
I'm going to say the thing I wanted to look for was Josh Doxson, because that was a guy going into the draft that, every other draft post on Cincy Jungle was, we want a receiver. We don't want Will Fuller. We want Josh Doxson or Corey Coleman. And Doxson was almost there. And the Redskins didn't seem like a team that may take him because they already had Garcon and Deshaun Jackson. So he seemed like someone that might have slipped to him until it went receiver, I think with Fuller, Doxson, and Treadwell. And so that was something I would have liked to see, how good would if he looked in, but granted he's been hurt. I think he's only had one catch all season. So we'll have to wait till, I guess, 4 years from now when we play them again, unless we meet him in the playoffs. I guess I'd be pretty far in the playoffs.
I'd only be in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, that'd be Super Bowl.
Which I wouldn't object to. Obviously, if we're in it, but yeah, that's the thing I would have looked for with him being out. The one thing I'd like to see is I want to see our defense look like the defense we're used to. We let a fifth string quarterback run for 100 yards against us. We've kind of been gashed by either passing or on the ground or both by pretty much everyone we've played. We've had some good plays, but it just hasn't been the wow, we just shut this team down for 4 quarters. And you look at their running backs, they're not really big name guys, but as a group, they all average like over 5 yards a carry. Kirk Cousins has done a decent job. He has some good guys to throw to with Jordan Reed if he's healthy, and those 2 receivers I mentioned. And so I think their offense could be, is a pretty decent one that probably doesn't get enough recognition for what Gruden's been able to do. And so I think that's the thing I want to see is, can our defense finally play a whole game where they look like the defense that we got used to, the defense where guys like Dunlap and Atkins are coming in, they're bringing pressure, Vontez Burfict is blowing people up over the middle, and our secondary is getting interceptions and shutting people down. That's what I want to see. I don't want to see, someone like Trevor Siemian or Cody Kessler come in and complete 80% of their passes against us. I want to see us look like a playoff defense.
Yeah, and this would be a good offense to. There's a lot of firepower. Ken Marangolo told us about, Deshaun Jackson, Jordan Reed looks like he's coming back this week. So
Jameson Crowder too.
Yeah, so they've got a lot of weapons there, and it would be although it's a big test, Scott, you're right. I would agree with you that I would like to see the defense start to step up and be kind of more of that Mike Zimmer-esque unit that we've been so used to over the past handful of years. Do you got a prediction for us, Scott? Score prediction?
Yeah, I'm going to say, granted, we're the home team, which means absolutely nothing, but they say you can usually give the home team 3 points in an NFL game. I think that's the average starting line, and then you adjust it. So given that we're going to, let's say, be a 3-point favorite, and we should be a favorite because the Redskins are in Washington, D.C., and that's the capital of the United States of America, who did rebel against the British. So they don't have anything against Cincinnati. We were like the Midwest territories. We didn't even exist. And Cincinnatus was just some Roman general that, they would have read about in history. So they had nothing against, well, they had hated the Romans years ago, but that was, anyway. So they have nothing against the Bengals. They may not like the Washington. They may not like the Redskins because wasn't the French and Indians, so, who were fighting the British in a previous
so many
battle.
implications.
So they have tons of reasons to root against the Washington Redskins. They have no reason to root against us. So let's say we get the home field advantage. We get those 3 points. So I'm going to say, let's say we'll give them a couple touchdowns. We'll give a passing one for Cousins. We'll give to Jordan Reed because we chose, I'll say Sean Williams gives up a receiving touchdown. And then let's say a rushing touchdown because those guys are doing fairly decent. So we'll give them, and their kicker's decent, Hopkins. So we'll give them 17 points. I'll say 21-17 Bengals.
Okay. Connor, what you're looking for this week, and maybe some matchups, and then a score prediction from you?
Yeah, like I mentioned, I'm nervous about the deep threat, Deshaun Jackson. The Bengals have not played well against deep threats. I'm also looking for, I'm pretty sure it happened last week, but the Bengals need a hot start, and they need to just hold on to that. Figuratively and literally, last year the Bengals started off 8-0, but in that 8-0 start, it seemed like every single game they started off receiving the ball, driving down the field, and scoring a touchdown on the first drive. It probably didn't happen every single game, but it felt like that happened every single game. And the last time the Bengals played the Redskins in 2012, first play of the game, I believe, on offense was Mohamed Sanu's 71, I think, yard touchdown pass to AJ Green just out of Wildcat, out of nowhere. So, it's just one of those things where you need a hot start, get the running game going early, get AJ Green going early, just get something go. I don't care if it's Brandon get Cody Core or James Wright, not James Wright or Cody Core, but get like Tyler Boyd going or something like that. Just get in a rhythm on offense to start the game. The offense really came out and showed what they were made of in the second half of the Browns game and really put the hurt on them. But like we saw in the Patriots game, the offense really didn't do much in the second half. So I want to see just more consistency from the offense, I guess, just in general, but also a hot start. Continue to improve on third downs and in the red zone like they have been doing over the past couple of weeks, and take advantage of a defense that you should take advantage of. Hopefully the offensive line continues to play well like they did last week. Kevin Zeitler had a huge week. Russell Bodine, played through injury, and I don't know how the extent of his injury, but he got hurt the week before. No complaints from anyone, so I'm assuming he didn't play bad. Boy, he had an up and down week, but it is what it is, and the Redskins have two edge rushers, Ryan Kerrigan and Trent Murphy, both have 6 sacks apiece. So hopefully, I don't know if that's just based off of them playing bad offensive lines or circumstance, whatever it is. Hopefully they just are able to pass block well, are able to continue to carve up some holes in the running game. We had the I saw that earlier this week the Redskins were working out nose tackles. They were working out the former Browns guy. I think his name is Phil Taylor. Worked out Terrence Knighton, who was on their team last year. Which, I mean, I'm no expert, but I would assume that probably means that their nose tackles aren't playing well or someone got hurt. I think Chris Baker's their nose tackle right now, and he was, the backup to Terrence Knighton last year. I don't know why I forgot his name, but they don't have a great run defense. Also, I think another thing of note is that the Redskins are kind of an offense like the Bengals offense, where they're gaining a lot of yards. I think they're a top 10 yardage team, and I think they're 16th or 16th around that range in points scored. And so they're another defense where I hope the red zone, or not another offense where I hope the red zone defense can show up, prevent them. As long as they prevent the deep plays, I think the Bengals are going to be able to prevent red zone touchdowns. So just hold them to those short plays, no long plays given up from the defense. And for score prediction, man, I try to forget what Scott said because I know last week I said something similar, and I don't think that was even in my mind. I'm going to go, Tyler Eifert's back. I'm going to go Eifert 2 TDs. I'll give Green a TD. I'm going to go 27-20.
27-20. Scott, I think you said 21-17 Bengals. I'm assuming.
Connor didn't say Bengals.
You didn't say Bengals.
Bengals.
And it might be because Kendrick Golston, their nose tackles on IR.
Kendrick Golston, that's what it is, yeah. So, that'll be probably Chris Baker filling in.
Yeah, so I think Ken Marangolo earlier said 27-24 or something to that effect, 27-23 in favor of the Redskins.
Do you think he just misspoke when he said Redskins?
He might have. This game to me has shootout written all over it, and the Bengals' pass defense hasn't played particularly well at times. They played well last week, but in playing well last week, as you mentioned, Scott, Kevin Hogan ran all over the place because they were smothering the back end of the defense, but they allowed Hogan to run around and make some plays, and that was disappointing to see. And that's a continued trend that they haven't played that well against the run this year either. I don't know exactly what's going on defense. I really don't. Gunther's now in his third season as the defensive coordinator.
Is it his third? Oh, yeah, it is his third.
Yeah, he started in 2014, and then, he's now in his third season as the Bengals defensive coordinator. Now, obviously, they made quite a few change-ups in the coaching ranks, especially on that side of the ball, but it just doesn't explain the difference we're seeing this year in the defense all around. So as much as I would say that I hope to see, like you guys, them really be able to clamp down on some of those big passes to Deshaun Jackson and things of that nature, I'm not so sure based on what we've seen so far this year from them that they'll be able to do that. Aside from that, I think I'd really like to see the run game continue. And I think when teams travel far, they're playing in a completely different venue. They're obviously probably trying to have some semblance of fun this week going around and probably getting a little bit of sightseeing in. And these guys are probably tired this week. And what better way to impose your will than to keep grinding the run game and building off of the momentum that they built last week against the Browns with Jeremy Hill and Giovanni Bernard both having very good games on the ground. So and I think that'll remedy some of those issues that you mentioned, Connor, in terms of the edge rushers having combined 12 sacks between Ryan Kerrigan and Trent Murphy. And Trent Murphy was a guy I liked seeing him play out here in Stanford. He was always a very productive college player. But that being said, I think it's a tight one. I'm going to go 31-30 Bengals. And I just think that both teams will kind of try and wing it around the field. Josh Norman could have a big effect. But for now, I think
Rashad Breeland doesn't get enough credit. He's a really good corner too. He had that really bad game against Antonio Brown, but he was one of the top, probably 15, 20 corners last year before they even brought in Josh Norman. So he's another guy who look out for.
He's a solid player, no doubt. Those are our score predictions. You can leave us yours on Twitter at BengalsOBI. You can download the show on iTunes, subscribe to our YouTube and SoundCloud accounts. You can email us at theobinsider@gmail.com. We love to hear from you guys. Thank you so much for downloading and everything. Guys, thanks for making the appearance tonight. Good stuff from you both, as always.
Yep, it's been good. And I'm sorry it took me so late to get in the proper attire.
That's all right. That's all right. You're looking like a little Halloween costume-ish there for a little bit. You had some goggles and surgical masks going on. I didn't really know what was going on.
Yeah,
but,
when I first walked in, it was a dust mask and safety glass.
Yeah.
And I thought it probably wouldn't be good to try to say anything, but as I was trying to get logged on.
Well, I appreciate you making the effort and coming on. I know you got a lot of stuff going on. And Connor, same to you as well. Our thanks also to Ken Marangolo from Hogs Haven, the SB Nation Redskins side. He brought some great stuff to us tonight. Can't wait to stream this and get that out to all the listeners. Guys, thank you. Let's get a win in London. Hooday.
Hooday.